I'm going to be very honest. I'm going to try and be as unbiased as possible as an Arsenal fan. Do I think this was a red card, or sorry, a second yellow card? Arsenal versus Brighton finishes 1-1. We're going to do a tactical analysis. If you're a Gunner, you're going to be upset at the red card situation that happened with Declan Rice. We'll get to that in a second. If you're Brighton, you're going to be upset at the fact that they didn't capitalize when Arsenal got the red and get all 3 points in the game. So we're going to do a tactical analysis. If you guys like these types of videos, please make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out a lot. Like the video as well so that you're letting me know you want more of these, and we're going to try and do these as often as possible, probably at least one game per week. So let's get straight into it with the lineups. Arsenal playing with a 4-3-3, although they were playing with a back three in the build-up, and we'll explain that in a little bit with some screenshots. They had Jurrien Timber on the left, Gabriel Saliba as the two center backs, Ben White as the right back, David Raya in goal, obviously. Thomas Partey as the 6, with Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard as the 2 10s. Trossard coming in after a solid performance off the bench. On the left side, Kai Havertz in the middle, and Saka as the right winger. As far as Brighton's lineup, they had Verbruggen in goal. They had Veltman, Van Heck, Dunk, and Hinchelwood as the back line. James Milner, who had to come off because he got injured in the 17th minute. He was playing alongside Baliba, and obviously this is not the ideal midfield for Brighton, just because Billy Gilmour and O'Reilly, Billy Gilmour left and O'Reilly got injured. So a few weeks ago, they probably thought this would look a little bit different. But anyway, Joao Pedro in front of them, Minte on the right, Mitoma on the left, and Danny Welbeck in the center. So that's the lineup. I think because of the midfield that Brighton had, it not that it was a makeshift midfield, but it's not the best players that they have in those positions because of the injuries, because obviously Gilmour leaving. I think it presented a really good opportunity for Arsenal to try and recover the ball in those areas because, as you guys know, Brighton really likes to play out of the back using those midfielders. We'll get to some screenshots in a little bit. Let's get to the stats. 64% possession for Brighton, 36% for Arsenal. Obviously, this is not necessarily that it's misleading, but this is mostly due to the fact that once Declan Rice got the red card in the second half, at the beginning of the second half, Arsenal kind of just sat in and protected tried to protect the lead, ultimately just protected the draw for the 1-1 finish. So, a couple things that we're going to look at. The first thing we're going to look at is Arsenal's defensive pressure in the opposition half, in Brighton's half. So this was at the beginning of the game, and I thought Arsenal did a really, really good job to recover the ball in dangerous positions. As you can see, Brighton playing out of the back. Look at how almost every single player for Brighton is marked. Hard to tell, but to the far side of the screen, did have another Arsenal player there, making it very difficult, especially with a new player like Baliba, who hasn't gotten as many minutes, isn't the ideal number 6 for Brighton. Arsenal did a really good job of pressing, and Arsenal pressed slightly different than traditional teams will press. Most teams will press with their center forward cutting off one side, and then that near side winger stepping to the ball or stepping to the outside back. Instead, Arsenal were pressing with Martin Odegaard, releasing him from the middle so that he could almost end up in like a winger position. So if we look at another screenshot, almost the exact same thing, basically just slightly higher up the field. Arsenal did a really good job of recovering the ball through a lot of these pressing opportunities, which, although didn't create any goals, made it very difficult for Brighton to build out. And I think it showed Arsenal having a really good half, which ultimately did end up leading to them going up 1-0 before halftime. So now let's take a look at our defensive shape in our own half. Again, very similar with Martin Odegaard slightly stepping forward, allowing the two Brighton center backs to play the ball back and forth. But anytime he got into the middle, we were nice and tight, ready to press, ready to recover the ball. Everybody else is pretty well marked throughout the different parts of the pitch. So Arsenal, once again, doing a really good job defensively. In the build-up, this is starting to become a trademark of Mikel Arteta. Obviously, I think there's a little bit of influence from Pep Guardiola. But when Arsenal build out of the back, they play with the inverted fullback. So you see Ben White, Saliba, and Gabriel form the back three. Jurrien Timber slips into the midfield with Thomas Partey, which allows Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard to go slightly higher up the pitch. Also allows us to play with two pivots, which is really good when you're trying to build out of the back. I really like when they do this. I think it's been very effective. I think Jurrien Timber's a really good player in order to slip him into the midfield. And obviously, you already know that Zinchenko, if he were to replace Jurrien Timber, could do the same thing. I think it might be slightly a little different with Calafiori, but I do like this tactic, and I think it works really well. And Arsenal have trained this tactic really, really well. Now, here's the thing that I really like about Arteta is the fact that everybody wants to have an entertaining style of football. I think even Manchester City, with the influence that they have had, Pep Guardiola, everybody wants to see how pretty it looks to keep the ball the entire time. But I think Arteta does a really good job of analyzing the spaces and the areas of weakness of the other team and kind of adjusting the tactics in order to exploit those spaces. So instead of just building out of the back the entire time, because Brighton were playing in a pretty tight amount of space, how they pressed, Arsenal did a couple of times try and play that long ball in behind to stretch them out and create opportunities in that space behind the back line. So as you can see, Brighton trying to press up a little bit higher. This is David Raya right now, and he's clearing the ball all the way to the other side because Arsenal didn't want to take the risk of playing out of the back when they know that the space is in behind the back line. So another moment here, same thing. I believe it's Jurrien Timber who gets the ball, tries to play that ball in behind. I believe Kai Havertz is slightly offsides in this instant, but we did have Leandro Trossard running in to get the ball in behind, and there's a lot of space behind the Brighton back line. As you can see, between their three lines, they're in about a 20-yard space. So Arteta did a really, really good job of exploiting that space in behind. And although it didn't come directly from that tactic, when Jurrien Timber cleared the ball in behind the Brighton back line, Saka managed to push one of the center backs off the ball, played it to Kai Havertz, and Kai Havertz scored the first goal. So I think it was just analyzing that Brighton had really tight space between their lines, and that space wasn't behind. So I did like that Arteta employed that tactic instead of just saying we're going to build out of the back regardless if there is no space in order to do it, right? So Arsenal go up 1-0 at halftime. Declan Rice, because of a tackle in the first half, is already on a yellow. As soon as the second half starts, I'm going to show the clip. This is what happens. So Brighton get a set piece. Declan Rice is kind of walking away from it. Right before the Brighton player is about to kick it, Declan Rice toe pokes the ball out of the way. And because of this, he gets a second yellow and gets sent off for a red. Now, I'm going to be very honest. I'm going to try and be as unbiased as possible as an Arsenal fan. Do I think this was a red card a second yellow card? Absolutely. If we look at the way that the FA rule is written, it says cautionable offenses. A player is cautioned if guilty of delaying a restart of play. So, Declan Rice delays clearly the restart of play. Definitely should be a second yellow and a red. Now, I think if Declan Rice gets out of the way as he's walking back and does not toe poke the ball, not even if he gets out of the way, but even if he stands in that same spot and just doesn't toe poke the ball out of play, I think the referee just maybe talks to him, tells him to get away from the ball a little bit earlier, but he doesn't give him a second yellow. It's that movement that he does with the toe to just poke that ball out of play that delays the restart and earns him that second yellow. So, is it a second yellow? Absolutely. And a lot of pundits are going to be unhappy. A lot of people are going to say that's absolutely not a yellow. The way it's written in the rules, the way it's written in the laws of the game, that's a second yellow. However, here's the main problem, and I know people are going to be in the comment section if I don't mention this. Joao Pedro in the first half, the ball goes out of bounds as he's chasing. It's clearly out of bounds. And to prevent Arsenal from playing a quick restart on the throw-in, he just smashes the ball back into play all the way to David Raya. Arteta is fuming on the sideline, and this happens obviously before Declan Rice red card. Arteta's fuming on the sidelines because he believes it should be a yellow. I think the referee makes a huge mistake at being super inconsistent in this match because that should have been a clear yellow. Had he given a yellow for Joao Pedro, not only do I think it makes everything okay, but I think Declan Rice, because he sees that yellow in the first half, probably doesn't do the same thing in the second half, knowing he's already on a yellow, knowing another player on the field has already been booked for the same offense. So that's why I think the referee got it wrong, is he was inconsistent. He failed to give the yellow card to Joao Pedro in the first half, and then he gave it to Declan Rice for the same thing in the second half. But is it a yellow? Absolutely. So shortly after that, Arsenal had to go back to essentially a back five. subbed off a couple of attacking players, Trossard being one of them. So in the second half, this is our shape, and this is where we're probably going to get a lot of criticism because we are title contenders. Even though we're playing with a man down, I think a lot of people would have said we're still at home, play with a little bit more of a balanced structure, and try and see if you can snag the second goal and get away with the 3 points. However, Arsenal did not do that. We ended up playing with a 5-1-3, Thomas Partey in between the two lines, and basically no pressure on the ball when Brighton had it. So Brighton was pinging these long balls, trying to get some services into the box, and the entire second half was essentially played in our own half. So that's the disappointing part that people are going to be upset about. I think Arteta was pretty intelligent in knowing that it's a long season. We're only 3 games in, and a loss would have affected us way more than a draw. And we'll take the draw, especially against a team like Brighton. I think if we had been playing against a team who was slightly lower in the table, a team that's probably not going to finish in the top 10, Arteta would have probably chased the 3 points. But respect to Brighton, they're a good team with a good manager, and I think Arteta played it smart by going for the draw this early in the season. However, it is very difficult because you guys already know Manchester City rarely drops points. The one piece that I was extremely disappointed about is Thomas Partey. Thomas Partey can be a really good player as a 6, and then there's times where he switches off, loses focus, either loses the ball in dangerous positions or fails to do his job defensively, which causes problems. So here's a screenshot of the goal that Brighton scored. I believe it was Joao Pedro. Thomas Partey, if I would have rewinded this clip 5 seconds ago, Thomas Partey and Joao Pedro were on the exact same line when that ball got played in behind. And instead of tracking Joao Pedro, he kind of slowly jogged. Joao Pedro gets the ball with basically an empty goal because David Raya had just made the save and slots it underneath Raya. So these are the kinds of things, these are the kind of details that I think is the reason why Thomas Partey has not been a consistent starter for us, why he's not been our top choice. If we could sign probably a better player, or now that we have Mikel Merino, when Mikel Merino gets healthy, I think Thomas Partey is probably going to be sitting the bench because I think Mikel Merino brings the defensive work rate to the team that Thomas Partey maybe doesn't bring. So that's disappointing because I felt like all he had to do was just run a little bit harder. He would have gotten to the ball first, and maybe Arsenal are going away with the 1-0 win. But let me know what you guys' thoughts are. Are you guys disappointed in the performance? Are you do you respect Brighton enough that a draw is probably a good result? Let me know in the comment section down below. It is a long season, but overall, not terrible, not great for Arsenal.